Although you've been writing for The New Yorker since '92, you've been a staff writer, right? You've been a staff writer for now 16 years. You have primarily written for the magazine, although a whole class of people know you removed from The New Yorker as the author of The Orchid Thief, probably most of all because you get to be the rare person whose tombstone could say, "Here lies Susan Orlean, Meryl Streep played her in the movie."
Right.
And this is something that, although maybe not the kind of fame you expected to have in your life, you are now best known probably for that, more so than anything else.
And I'm happy to say I don't resent that. I don't mind when people say to me, "I saw the movie, I haven't yet read the book."
That's okay.
Well, in our culture, movies are just disseminated in such a huge way that even a crummy movie that no one goes to see is seen by several million people. So if it brought some new readers to the book, or even just a consciousness of it, I'm happy.
Well, invariably the publisher, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm going to guess, that the publishers of the book were smart enough to re-release it around the time of the film's release.
Yes and no. That's a whole other subject. But they found the movie so confusing as...
Oh, the publisher didn't like it.
The publisher didn't get it, and that is, I think, a tribute to the movie, which is they kept saying, but it's not really The Orchid Thief. And in fact, it's one of the few movies that I can think of where the book is actually a character rather than the source material.
Right.
So it's been very interesting. I worried, among other things that worried me was, number one, are people going to think I'm a murderer and a drug addict and, you know, have sex with my subjects? But secondly...
for the record,
yeah, but that,
no,
you know, yeah.
no.
Right, exactly.
Let's disabuse people of that.
But my real worry was that even though I've been writing for The New Yorker for a long time, I tend to write about people who don't read The New Yorker. They had no presuppositions about me, about my work, about where the work would be published. And I liked that. I liked the relatively anonymous approach that I could make to my subjects. And I really worried that a movie, it just vaults you into a different universe of, you know, the movie's on television all the time.
Well, more of the people who wouldn't read The New Yorker would have seen the movie.
Exactly. But so far it hasn't been an issue.
Now, I was interested to be reminded as well that this is not the first of your stories to be turned into a film. You actually wrote the magazine piece, I believe, for Outside magazine that was the basis for the film Blue Crush.
Right. I find this so funny. When I write stories that every now and again I think if The New Yorker didn't exist, nobody would publish me because my taste is so unconventional. And the idea that Hollywood, which is in many ways so much more hidebound and conventional,
well, exactly the opposite.
Has ended up. I have another movie in production now. I find it.
Well, do tell. Based on what?
I did a story about a young girl who raises homing pigeons. I did the piece. It was about maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and Steven Spielberg bought it. And actually, that's not such a leap, but it was a story about a 13-year-old raising homing pigeons, and every now and again, I think, thank God for The New Yorker, because where would this story run?
Right.
Even though I feel it's very important in a certain kind of way, most magazines wouldn't have, say, a pigeon beat.
Well, it's an amazing thing, and I think what you say is true, that the kinds of stories that you've gravitated toward in your career are really New Yorker stories. You've not only written for The New Yorker, but it does seem like a good marriage in that respect.
Right.
This is a question I like to ask of writers. I suspect I know the answer, but you come up with all the stories that you decide to do.
I do.
This is not a top-down system, it's a bottom-up system.
Absolutely. In fact, I feel like that's an enormous part of your responsibility as a reporter at the magazine, is to be finding those stories and finding ideas that are original, and that editors, because they're in the office, they wouldn't have occasion to be out there in the world. And every once in a while, something will be suggested. I think there's been more effort under David Remnick to have everybody actively thinking about story ideas, not necessarily ones that they would do. Whereas under the Sean regime, not only did nobody ever suggest a story idea, most people didn't tell each other what they were working on.
Right, yeah.
Which was, for whatever reason,
weird and counterproductive.
Right, and then when Tina Brown came in, the first thing she did was she had a list of story ideas, and she just wanted to plug in the writers to the stories, and it was a huge shock to people.
Right.
So we've gone in this cycle and come to a place that I think is a really good balance.
How often, on a, say, percentage basis, do you propose stories to the New Yorker that they say, you know what, no?
Well, I've been lucky. I think it's partly because the stories I propose are so peculiar. I just remember one day I was visiting a friend who's a painter, and he had a catalog. I guess he was on the phone, and I was flipping through this catalog, and it was taxidermy supplies. And I thought, taxidermy supplies? You mean there's an actual industry of taxidermy? And I bolted out of his studio, and the next morning ran into the office, and I said in the meantime, I had Googled taxidermy, discovered that the World Taxidermy Championships were coming up.
Championships?
Indeed. And
it's a competitive sport now?
It is.
I had no idea.
And I ran into the office the next day, and I said to David, I burst into his office, I said, can I go cover the World Taxidermy Championships? And he said, let me think a minute. I don't think anyone else is doing that yet for the magazine. Yeah, go ahead.
Who knew?
And, you know, so partly I feel like I have a good feeling for a story that's going to work for me.
Right.
I've been given the freedom to say, let me go find out what the story is. I don't really know what it is, but I'm excited, and let me do it.